The survival industry is lying to you about what collapse actually looks like. Not a slow lie, not a marketing exaggeration, a fundamental misunderstanding of how civilizations fracture. They're selling you solutions to Hollywood scenarios while the real pattern sits in history books nobody reads. I spent 2 years analyzing societal breakdowns across 14 different regions and time periods. The consistency is disturbing. Let me show you what actually happens. Most preppers stockpile for the wrong timeline. They're building 3-month reserves for an event that takes 7 years to fully materialize. It's not ignorance, it's pattern recognition failure. We're wired to prepare for acute threats because our ancestors survived lions, not economic erosion. A predator attacks on Tuesday. Inflation compounds over decades. Here's the part that breaks the standard narrative. Societal collapse doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic grid-down moment where everyone suddenly realizes the old world ended. Instead, it's Thursday. Then it's Friday. Your neighbor still goes to work. The gas station still has fuel, just at a different price. You're still buying groceries, just different items than last year. Argentina 2001 is the template nobody studies correctly. People focus on the bank riots. They miss the 18 months before when middle-class families started making tiny adjustments, switching from beef to chicken to lentils. New shoes became resoled shoes. Vacation savings became grocery money. Each shift felt reasonable in isolation. That's the mechanism. Reasonable adjustments that compound. By the time you're standing in a breadline, you've been collapsing for years. You just called it budgeting. The survival industry can't sell that reality, can't package it. There's no tactical vest for gradual purchasing power erosion, no freeze-dried solution for the decade your savings loses 40% of its value while your salary increases 9%. The actual crisis is boring right up until you realize you can't afford to be middle class anymore. Venezuela followed the identical pattern. 2010 looked fine if you weren't paying attention. Professionals still went to offices, restaurants still served meals, but flour disappeared for 3 days. Then it came back, cost more, milk got harder to find in certain neighborhoods. Each shortage resolved itself, just at a higher price or lower quality. The middle class didn't vanish in a coup. They got reclassified through inflation until their lifestyle matched poverty wages. Most people reading this are already in the early phases and don't recognize the pattern. You've made adjustments in the last 36 months, subtle ones. Maybe you stopped buying organic, switched brands, started checking prices on items you used to grab automatically, delayed replacing something that still technically works. These feel like smart financial decisions. They are. But they're also adaptation to decline. The question isn't whether you should make those adjustments. You should. The question is whether you recognize them as data points in a larger trajectory, because the gap between we're budgeting smarter and we're 3 years into managed decline is just perspective. Weimar Germany is the case study everyone references wrong. They focus on wheelbarrows of cash. They ignore the 2 years before when professionals started taking payment in goods instead of currency. A lawyer accepting butter and eggs for services isn't barter economy cosplay. It's a rational response to currency losing value faster than you can spend it. The professionals adapted first. That's the detail that matters. The educated class with resources and options looked at the trajectory and started making moves, while everyone else waited for official confirmation that never came. There was no announcement, no government declaration of collapse, just a steady procession of professionals quietly shifting their asset mix and accepting alternative payments. By the time currency completely failed, the pattern was 18 months established. Here's what I need you to understand. The collapse you're preparing for already started, not next year, not when some triggering event happens. The metrics are live right now. Real wages versus cost of living, debt to GDP ratios, pension fund solvency. These aren't predictions, they're measurements of ongoing processes. You're not preparing for a future event, you're adapting to a current condition. The difference is everything. Future event preparation looks like stockpiling. Current condition adaptation looks like systematic lifestyle restructuring. One waits for the crisis, the other recognizes we're already in it and adjusts accordingly. Most people won't accept this framework because it requires admitting their parents' economic reality isn't available anymore. that the middle-class stability they're trying to recreate is a historical anomaly, not a default state. The post-World War II economic expansion in Western nations was a specific set of circumstances that aren't repeating. Preparing for that reality to return is like preparing for the Roman Empire to rebuild. It's not coming back. Something else is coming instead. The families who navigate this successfully won't be the ones with the most gear. They'll be the ones who recognize the pattern early and restructured before their options narrowed. They shifted assets, developed secondary income sources, built community relationships with practical value, learned production skills instead of just consumption optimization. They didn't wait for collapse. They watched their neighbors' purchasing power erode and understood the message. What comes next is the framework. The specific moves that matter when you accept we're already in managed decline. Not someday, today. The strategies that work aren't about bunkers and bullets. They're about network position and skill acquisition during the window, while systems still function partially. Let me be specific. Housing costs aren't coming down. Anyone telling you to wait for a market correction is selling you fantasy. The correction already happened. It was called 2008. What followed wasn't recovery, it was asset consolidation. Institutional investors now own single-family homes at scale. That's not a temporary phenomenon, it's the new structure. Your move isn't waiting for prices to drop. It's recognizing that traditional home ownership might not be your optimal path and adjusting strategy accordingly. Maybe that's land purchase in a secondary market. Maybe it's multi-generational housing. Maybe it's accepting permanent renter status and optimizing everything else around that reality. The specific answer depends on your situation. The common thread is dropping the fantasy that 1950s economics are coming back. Income stability is the next assumption that needs examination. Your job isn't safe, not because your performance is lacking, because the economic structure rewarding employment over ownership is inverting. Every efficiency gain in productivity goes to capital now, not labor. That's not political commentary, it's 40 years of wage data. The adaptation isn't working harder at your job, it's developing parallel income streams while you still have the stability to build them. That might be a side business, could be learning a trade skill with direct market value, might be creating digital products. The format matters less than the principle. You need income sources that aren't dependent on someone else's payroll system. Most people resist this because it sounds like hustle culture nonsense. It's not. Hustle culture tells you to monetize your passion. I'm telling you to develop economic optionality before your primary income source disappears. Those are completely different frameworks. Food costs are the metric nobody wants to track, honestly. Pull your grocery receipts from 3 years ago if you still have them. Compare item by item, not total bill. Because you've already adjusted purchasing. You're buying different products at different quantities. The comparison that matters is what the same items cost then versus now. When that number is consistently 15 to 25% higher, you're watching currency devaluation in real time. The response isn't couponing harder, it's understanding that your currency's purchasing power is in managed decline and structuring accordingly. Some people start gardens, others buy in bulk and learn preservation, some join buying co-ops. The tactic matters less than recognizing you're in a devaluation environment and acting like it. Healthcare is where this gets genuinely difficult. Insurance costs are rising faster than inflation while covering less. Deductibles are climbing. Networks are narrowing. This isn't inefficiency, it's systematic cost shifting from institutions to individuals. I don't have a clean solution here. Medical costs can destroy decades of preparation in a single emergency. What I can tell you is that optimizing your health now, while you have access to preventative care, is higher priority than almost any other preparation, because managing chronic conditions without medical infrastructure is nearly impossible. The veterans who understand this framework aren't building bunkers in Montana. They're staying near functional medical systems while those systems still work. They're handling dental work now, getting vision corrected, addressing issues that are manageable today but catastrophic later. Community is the component that makes people uncomfortable because it requires admitting you can't do this alone. Most preparedness content sells individual sovereignty. That's ego-driven fantasy. Every successful survival scenario in history involved groups. Your network matters more than your stockpile. The relationships you build now determine your options later. That doesn't mean joining a prepper compound. It means knowing your neighbors, developing genuine relationships with people who have different skills than you, creating mutual dependence instead of isolation. When systems degrade, the people who navigate successfully are embedded in functional communities. The lone wolf types don't make it. They never have. That's not opinion, it's historical pattern across every collapse scenario. So here's the actual framework. Accept that managed economic decline is the current reality, not a future threat. Stop waiting for conditions to improve and start restructuring around permanent adaptation. Develop multiple income sources, acquire production skills, not just consumption efficiency, build community relationships with practical value, optimize health while medical access exists, shift assets toward tangible utility instead of paper wealth. None of this is radical. It's basic risk management when you accept the trajectory. The professionals are already doing it. They're just not announcing it publicly because there's no social reward for being early to obvious conclusions. You're watching purchasing power erode in real time. Your parents' economic reality isn't coming back. The middle-class stability you're trying to recreate was a historical anomaly. What replaces it is already taking shape. The people who adapt early have options. The ones who wait for official confirmation that collapse has arrived will find their choices already made for them. There's no announcement coming, no clear signal, just steady degradation until the gap between your expectations and reality becomes impossible to ignore. You're not preparing for collapse, you're adapting to it. The difference is recognizing it's already happening. Everything else follows from that. The question isn't whether you believe this analysis. The question is whether you're already making the adjustments and just haven't named them yet. Check your spending from 3 years ago. Look at what you've quietly stopped buying. Notice what you're tolerating now that you wouldn't have accepted before. That's your data. The collapse isn't coming. You're already in it. What you do with that information in the next 12 months determines which side of the divide you end up on.